announcement himself.
I have signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom on a commercial advisory deal.
But Dana White didn't take too kindly.
Tom Aspinall has just signed with Eddie Hearn's agency, and he made the decision that sent shockwaves through combat sports.
Listen, if Eddie wants to box, we can box. We can box if Eddie wants to box.
This development triggered an explosive reaction that went far beyond typical business moves. Hearn erupted, branding Tom a betrayer, and even issuing a direct fight challenge to Eddie. But the real drama was only beginning.
I have signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom on a commercial advisory deal. I wanted to add to my value.
That was Tom Aspinall.
What unfolded next will completely stun you. Let's dissect every detail. The deal, March 5th, 2026, marked a pivotal moment when Tom Aspinall became Eddie Hearn's inaugural client at his freshly launched Matchroom talent agency. Hearn announced it across social platforms immediately. His message was brief and direct.
Eddie's someone that I've known for a fair bit. I trust Eddie. I want to make as much money and grow commercially as much as possible.
Tom expressed his position clearly through a personal video statement that dropped alongside the official announcement.
Yeah, the company has talked to him. I haven't talked to him, and Tom and I obviously need to talk.
Clearly, we're still in recovery mode. That single word, recovering, unlocks the entire reasoning behind this partnership. Aspinall hasn't stepped into the octagon since October 25, 2025. That evening at UFC 321 in Manchester, his championship defense against Cyril Gane concluded as a no contest. Repeated illegal eye strikes from Gane triggered bilateral traumatic Brown syndrome, an uncommon injury affecting the eye muscles in both organs, resulting in double vision and intense migraines. A preliminary corrective operation occurred in late December 2025, followed by comprehensive double eye reconstruction in February 2026. Even at the time of this partnership announcement, no definitive comeback timeline exists. So here stands Aspinall, the UFC heavyweight champion of the world. He remains unable to compete, training properly is impossible, and his connection with Dana White has grown frigid at best.
You know, he came out recently, or his dad too, saying that, you know, they felt like I don't know how they said it, but that I had sort of on him in the way that I had spoke about, you know, his eye injury, which was absolutely positively not the case.
Dana White revealed on March 6, 2026, one day following the signing announcement, that he hadn't personally communicated with his heavyweight champion since that disastrous October conclusion. When Aspinall's representative spoke publicly about the injury, claiming Dana had downplayed or dismissed its severity, Dana fired back aggressively.
Slightly disappointing because he hadn't spoke to me. He hadn't give any he was already giving updates on my health and he had no idea what had gone on.
However, when Aspinall faced direct questioning about Dana's post-fight comments, his response was crystal clear. Ariel Helwani pressed him about how it felt when Dana characterized the situation as Tom refusing to continue rather than acknowledging the legitimate injury stoppage.
Listen, if Eddie wants to box, we can box. We can box if Eddie wants to box.
Helwani then inquired whether Dana had attempted any personal contact since that night. This context frames the entire signing perfectly: a champion without scheduled fights, a deteriorated relationship with the promotional leader, and an ambition to expand his brand while rehabilitation continues. So he traveled to Monaco alongside his father Andy, met with Eddie Hearn, and forged their agreement. The arrangement focuses purely on commercial and strategic advisory services. It encompasses endorsement opportunities, sponsorship deals, brand development, digital content creation, publishing ventures, and broadcast partnerships. His UFC contract remains completely untouched. Boxing promotion plays no role whatsoever. Aspinall maintains his UFC heavyweight championship status unchanged. Andy Aspinall continues managing daily operations exactly as he has throughout Tom's entire professional journey. The Matchroom talent agency operates above this established framework, providing an additional tier of elite commercial expertise. It's not replacing the family-centered team that has always anchored Aspinall's career. Hearn himself clarified this distinction emphatically. His agency wasn't there for a takeover. It existed to unlock opportunities that a small, close-knit operation simply lacks the connections to access. But this move transmitted a powerful message. The timing, arriving just weeks after Dana White's company had stolen one of Hearn's premier boxing stars, ensured that message resonated throughout the industry. To grasp why that timing struck so devastatingly, you must understand exactly what had been brewing between these two powerhouses long before Aspinall ever set foot in Monaco. The Cold War between Dana White and Eddie Hearn. These weren't two businessmen meeting for the first time. This represented a decade-spanning rivalry that had been building, emerging, and intensifying. By early 2026, it had evolved into something resembling open combat rather than simple competition. For years, both men operated within the same broad arena, combat sports, without direct confrontation. Hearn controlled Matchroom Boxing, among the most powerful entities in British and global boxing. White commanded the UFC, the undisputed leader in mixed martial arts. Surface-level mutual respect existed. Hearn occasionally praised White's commercial acumen. White acknowledged Matchroom's influence in UK markets. But beneath that facade, White had always harbored contempt for boxing's operational methods. Its scattered championship structure, its promoter-centric economics, its consistent failure to deliver the matchups fans demanded. Around 2018 to 2020, White began voicing these criticisms publicly, launching direct attacks on boxing's framework and the promoters controlling it. Hearn retaliated, highlighting UFC's own problems with fighter compensation and restrictive multi-year exclusive agreements. This exchange became their standard pattern. Neither man retreated. Then late 2025 changed everything. Dana White unveiled Zuffa Boxing under TKO Group Holdings, backed by massive Saudi Arabian investment through the General Entertainment Authority and its boxing division Skill, directed by Turki Alal Sheikh. This wasn't some side venture. White presented it as a direct assault on traditional boxing's establishment, promising enhanced purses, UFC-caliber production values, and a fighter-focused approach he claimed promoters like Hearn had never delivered. By February 2026, White abandoned all pretense of politeness. In one viral segment, White completely dismissed Hearn, labeling him the biggest pest in boxing and describing the sport as two guys just beating up babies. These weren't accidental remarks. They were deliberately repeated across numerous media outlets. Hearn struck back with equal force. During interviews with TalkSport and Sky Sports, he referenced White's Saudi partnership, declaring White now has a new daddy in Turki Alal Sheikh, and without that financial backing, Zuffa events would be complete garbage. He labeled White a hypocrite. The same individual who previously mocked boxing promoters for requiring external funding was now entirely dependent on Saudi investment to launch his boxing operation. These confrontations weren't mere background chatter. They fueled every business decision between both camps, transforming each move into strategic warfare. Then the verbal sparring transcended mere words. When a journalist asked White in early March 2026 about any possibility of settling their dispute in a boxing ring, White didn't dismiss the notion.
Yeah, back in the day, I used to box with all the guys, boxers and UFC guys. I have boxed.
So if Eddie Hearn's up for it, you're on for it.
Absolutely.
The journalist pressed harder, asking White directly whether he'd feel confident facing Hearn, who holds a 10-year age advantage.
Is there going to be a Zuffa belt where, like, the winner of the Zuffa belt has a springboard into like Riyadh season and a championship fight, a Ring Magazine fight?
You and I have never talked about this, but the answer is yes.
That exchange perfectly captures the temperature of their rivalry, heading into the Aspinall signing. These weren't two executives trading polite, competitive remarks through official statements. These were two men who had reached the point where one was openly challenging the other to physical combat. White even suggested making it a Jake Paul-style Netflix event, placing both himself and Hearn in the same age demographic Paul typically targets. Then mid-February 2026 brought Conor Benn's departure from Matchroom. Ben had remained with Hearn since turning professional in 2016. 10 full years, Ben had constructed his entire professional foundation under Hearn's guidance. Ben left through a lawyer's email, no phone call, no personal conversation, to accept a reported single-fight $15 million contract with Zuffa Boxing. The deal positioned Ben on the undercard of Tyson Fury's April 2026 comeback bout against former world champion Regis Prograis. Hearn described losing Ben as devastating and a dagger through the heart. He called it the ultimate betrayal in an industry where loyalty once held meaning. From White's perspective, the Ben acquisition proved Zuffa's model was working. He used the moment to attack traditional promoters, stating fighters were finally understanding their alternatives and receiving proper compensation. Ben's defection wasn't merely a talent loss for Hearn. It represented public humiliation, a decade-long partnership destroyed by a single email and a larger paycheck. Hearn had supported Ben through doping scandals, regulatory challenges, and years of reputation rebuilding. Losing him to the same man who had just publicly volunteered to fight him made the wound intensely personal in ways pure business rarely achieves. The combat sports world observed and anticipated Hearn's response. Just 2.5 weeks later, Hearn announced Tom Aspinall, the reigning UFC heavyweight champion, as the inaugural client of his brand-new Matchroom talent agency. The statement was unmistakable, but the true impact of that counterstrike only becomes clear when you fully comprehend what Zuffa Boxing represents. its intended purpose, and why it threatens everything Hearn spent 3 decades building. What Zuffa Boxing actually represents, and why it threatens Hearn's empire. Zuffa Boxing officially launched in January 2026. Dana White serves as the public figurehead and primary decision-maker. Nick Khan, TKO Group president and key architect behind WWE's media rights strategy, oversees business operations and distribution. The financial foundation comes from Saudi Arabia's General Entertainment Authority and Skill, providing the capital that enables Zuffa to outbid traditional promoters on selected targets without hesitation. The model operates on 2 fundamental strategies. First is aggressive talent acquisition. Zuffa targets free agents and fighters whose contracts with competing promotions are expiring or flexible. They present short-term, high-value agreements, not the multi-year exclusive deals traditional promoters use for long-term control. Ben's contract was single fight, reportedly worth $15 million. Enter, earn, exit. It's designed to attract fighters seeking immediate financial gain without extended commitments, and it's proving effective. The second strategy focuses on event production. Zuffa events utilize UFC-level production standards, LED walkouts, immersive broadcast packages, military-precise scheduling. They stream on Paramount Plus in the United States, with international distribution already secured across the UK and Middle East. This isn't the traditional pay-per-view model that promoters like Hearn have depended on for decades. White has been completely transparent about his intentions. He branded Zuffa Boxing the new sheriff in town, making direct references to disrupting promoters who have maintained the same approach for 30 years. By March 2026, results were evident. Zuffa had already produced several successful events with a complete schedule of 12 to 16 shows planned annually. The Ben signing demonstrated that established names with long-standing promotional loyalties could be swayed with appropriate financial incentives. White also confirmed that Zuffa Boxing would operate with its own championship belt, completely independent of existing sanctioning organizations that have governed boxing for decades.
There will be a Zuffa belt, and then there will be a ring belt. And yes, I will not recognize any of the other sanctioning bodies.
White wasn't finished. He added that the Zuffa Championship would connect directly to Ring Magazine recognition, and he would reject all existing sanctioning bodies. Not the WBC, WBA, IBF, none of them.
My big focus is on building a fan base that completely trusts a brand like the UFC.
That detail carries enormous significance. White isn't attempting to collaborate with boxing's current power structure. He's constructing a parallel system, complete with its own championships, broadcast platform, fighter pipeline, and fan experience remains central to that vision.
So many times, me, you, the people watching this right now, you've stayed home on a Saturday night, you're excited for this fight, and then you turn the TV off at the end of the night and you're like, they got me again.
The trust component forms the foundation of White's proposition. He's invested over 20 years creating a product where fans know exactly what they're receiving, and he believes boxing has spent those same decades destroying that trust through mismatched competitions, sanctioning body politics, and events that left audiences feeling cheated.
We don't have any issues with Eddie. They can get whoever they want to represent them. Tito Ortiz used to represent people, and we got it done.
Now here's what makes Hearn's response with the Matchroom talent agency so strategically brilliant. Hearn cannot compete with Saudi funding on a fight-by-fight basis for every fighter in his stable. Zuffa's financial power on individual deals is simply overwhelming. But what Hearn can accomplish, and what nobody else in the industry had achieved before March 5th, 2026, is construct a talent management infrastructure that provides him commercial access to elite fighters across sports, even athletes contracted elsewhere. Matchroom Talent Agency focuses on endorsements, digital content, publishing, broadcast opportunities, and legal and commercial strategy. It doesn't require fighters to abandon their existing promotions. It operates above current contracts, not instead of them. This means Hearn can maintain commercial relationships with a UFC champion, someone Dana White's organization controls in every competitive aspect, without ever touching the fight contract. That's the strategic masterstroke. That's why Aspinall specifically was selected as the inaugural client, not a boxer, but a UFC champion. White's sport, White's fighter, Hearn's agency. When a reporter asked White directly about it,
I just felt like I met a man that was just a little bit broken, if I'm honest with you.
Hearn said that publicly.
White remained composed. But to understand why this deal struck so powerfully, why Aspinall agreed when every other manager had been refused, you must return to the conversation that preceded any contract signing. Why Tom Aspinall? Why now? What Eddie Hearn discovered. The most revealing aspect of this entire saga isn't the business arrangement itself. It's the conversation that occurred beforehand. Aspinall flew to Monaco with his father Andy to meet Eddie Hearn, and what Hearn encountered when he sat across from the UFC heavyweight champion wasn't what he anticipated.
I know you're humble, but at the same time, like, don't also forget what you've done and who you are. Yeah. You know what I mean? Put some, well, I know it's a bit cringe, but put some respect on the name.
The man facing him, undefeated in championship bouts, the premier heavyweight in UFC, arguably the most dangerous fighter on earth, was carrying substantial emotional weight.
I've learned a lot, to be honest, in the last since this happened. People will turn their back on you quick.
Aspinall himself, during his conversation with Ariel Helwani, discussed how the months following the Gain fight had affected him.
Then I come up with a doctor's report, and then people are like, "Oh, he's crying about it. He's doing a media tour on it. He's milking it."
He detailed accusations of fabricating the injury. He described the online harassment. He explained avoiding his phone for days after the fight because his vision wasn't recovering and he had no understanding of what the rehabilitation process would involve.
The thing about Tom, and I've known this for a while, is Tom has not had a manager. And trust me, every manager under the sun has tried to sign Tom.
Beneath all of that, the injury, public criticism, Dana White's silence, lay the business reality. Aspinall had never employed professional management. He had operated his career with a small team, his father Andy handling business matters since he turned professional. According to journalist Ariel Helwani, every manager in the industry had attempted to sign him over the years. Aspinall had consistently declined.
He said, you sure you want to represent me? I'm a bit of a sort of broken record at the moment. I said, what are you talking about? You're the UFC world.
So the question becomes, what did Eddie Hearn communicate that every other manager couldn't? Part of it was timing. Aspinall is sidelined without a fight date, carrying the burden of a challenging few months and watching his career's business aspects remain stagnant while the rest of his life is suspended. The conversation with Hearn occurred at precisely the right moment, but part of it was Hearn's actual words when they met. According to Hearn himself, Aspinall opened the meeting by questioning whether signing him currently even made sense.
I look at you and I think you are one of the biggest stars in global fight sports. So time to put some respect on that, time to build that brand, build that profile.
Hearn's response to that self-doubt was straightforward. He had analyzed Aspinall's profile, his finishing record, his divisional dominance, his status as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and recognized a commercial asset that had been dramatically undervalued because his support team simply lacked the infrastructure to unlock it.
Have they shown you the love and support that someone in your position deserves?
Not really.
Is that frustrating?
Yeah, well, it's disappointing, mate.
That pitch, direct, simple, and built around Aspinall's inherent value, secured the agreement. Aspinall had stated he wanted to enhance his worth and grow commercially as much as possible during recovery. Hearn's track record of transforming British fighters into global brands, securing major endorsement contracts, and navigating international media and brand partnerships represented exactly the expertise Aspinall's small team couldn't provide independently. The partnership encompasses endorsements, digital content strategy, publishing opportunities, broadcast deals, and advisory input on business negotiations. Hearn's team had already begun scheduling brand evaluations and endorsement pipelines before the contract was finalized. A formal press conference in London was scheduled for March 7, 2026 to outline Aspinall's specific commercial plans. For the first time in his career, the UFC heavyweight champion had professional management, and that manager was boxing's most prominent promoter, a man currently engaged in open warfare with Dana White. That combination creates a dynamic larger than any single business deal, and the questions it raises for UFC, fighter independence, and the future of combat sports are ones the industry is only beginning to address.
Here's what's really interesting about all of this. As you guys know, the UFC is the sport for all intents and purposes. I have known many managers over the years that the UFC hasn't liked. And the UFC has said, we're not talking to this guy. So you either figure it out or get someone else. You put someone else in front of us, get another manager, or we're going through you.
What this changes and future implications. Tom Aspinall's signing with Matchroom Talent Agency transcends a simple business arrangement between a fighter and advisor. It represents a significant shift across the entire combat sports landscape, and the consequences are still unfolding. Begin with what it means for Aspinall directly. He's a UFC champion without scheduled fights, minimal contact with Dana White, and growing conviction that the promotion hasn't provided the support he feels he deserves during one of his career's most challenging periods. He stated it clearly when Helwani asked if the UFC had properly cared for him following the injury.
But I want to see how this actually plays out, because the UFC could just say, we're not talking to you.
That's the UFC heavyweight champion stating on record that the organization hasn't demonstrated the love and support he deserves. Now he has Eddie Hearn in his corner for business matters. Hearn's advisory role could provide Aspinall significant leverage when his UFC contract requires renewal or extension, not by negotiating the fight contract directly, but by ensuring Aspinall enters those discussions with a much clearer understanding of his commercial value and a network of external revenue streams that reduces his financial dependence on any single UFC agreement. That's the mechanism of fighter empowerment here. It's not Aspinall threatening departure. It's Aspinall arriving at negotiations better informed, better represented, and less desperate. Ariel Helwani explained exactly why the UFC cannot simply dismiss Hearn the way they've dismissed unwelcome managers previously.
Tom could then say, well, if you're not talking to him, you're not talking to me. There's going to be a game of chicken here. Tom's not a free agent.
The UFC has employed this tactic before. They've told fighters, your manager isn't welcome in our meetings. Find someone else or deal with us directly. The question now is whether they would attempt that with Aspinall, who is by their own acknowledgement the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. If they did, Aspinall would face a decision no UFC champion has confronted quite this way before.
We don't have any issues with Eddie. They can get whoever they want to represent them.
That standoff has no clean resolution. The UFC needs their heavyweight champion back in the octagon. Aspinall needs the UFC to provide the fights and platform that built his reputation. Neither side benefits from confrontation, but neither wants to back down first. White remains composed regarding the champion for now. But White also clarified he still needs a personal conversation with Aspinall. When a reporter asked him directly whether Aspinall would compete again, do you think he'll fight again? I do. White believes Aspinall will return. Aspinall wants to return. The agency deal isn't about leaving the UFC. Both Hearn and Aspinall have emphasized this repeatedly, supported by the contract structure itself. 100% commercial and advisory, with no promotional rights, no boxing crossover, and no interference with the UFC contract. Regarding boxing, Hearn shut that down immediately. This isn't about boxing Tom Aspinall. Tom is a UFC champion. He's remaining in the UFC, and we're here to help him build his brand during recovery. The door isn't open in the short or medium term. Whether it stays closed after Aspinall's UFC career ends is a different question, one nobody needs to answer today. What the signing accomplishes immediately is shifting the perception balance in the White-Hearn war. Hearn lost Conor Benn, a fighter he developed over a decade, to Zuffa Boxing and $15 million. Within weeks, he had the UFC heavyweight champion signed to his agency. Industry analysts described it as Hearn's counterpunch, using a non-promotional talent management structure to secure an MMA foothold without directly challenging the UFC in fight promotion. If other UFC fighters follow Aspinall's example, if champions and top contenders begin seeking external commercial representation from major agencies with reach and relationships their smaller personal teams lack, the UFC may need to reconsider how it supports fighters' business affairs, structures fighter compensation, and handles talent retention in a world where athletes have more options than 5 years ago. Dana White and Eddie Hearn both believe they're building combat sports' future. White has Saudi money, a streaming platform, and a model that has already pulled one of Hearn's biggest names across the line. Hearn now has the UFC heavyweight champion in his commercial corner, a talent agency with no ceiling on which sport it can access next, and 30 years of experience turning fighters into brands. Nobody called Tom Aspinall a traitor, but the war surrounding him just became far more intriguing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click on one of the boxes appearing on your screen to watch more similar content.